today. The sacking of Gough Whitlam. I mean, seriously? I'm offended that this date has been so completely hijacked by Labor and the haters, by Prime Minister Anthony Albanese in a disgraceful speech last night. Even the Governor-General, Albanese's mate, putting her oar in. November 11 is when we should actually remember the Australians who died in World War I. So many small towns have memorials to their locals who died in that horror, laid down their lives for Australia. 1,500 First World War memorials are around this country, showing what a bloody harvest that war took of our young. 60,000 dead, which worked out then to 1 in every 80 Australians dying fighting in Europe or in the Middle East, in Gallipoli, other battlefields. How many young Australians today would risk their lives for this country? Some surveys say only 1 in 3 might be prepared. A country that's now seems to despise or neglect what should unite us, which is why we do need Remembrance Day. Yet today, this day has been absolutely dominated instead by outrage still at the sacking of Gough Whitlam and his Labor government on this day 50 years ago, 1975. When in fact what happened then can be summed up in just one sentence. A dangerously incompetent and lawless Labor government was sacked when it ignored all warnings to obey our Constitution, as it tried instead to run Australia without having the money which elected senators had to approve, and relieved voters, then endorsed its dismissal by the Governor-General by giving Labor its worst hiding in 44 years. The end. But this is how the Prime Minister described it all in a furious speech last night after announcing he'd erect another statue with your money to his hero, St Gough of Whitlam, a Prime Minister destroyed by evil Conservatives in cahoots with Governor-General Sir John Kerr.
Make no mistake, November the 11th, 1975 was not a constitutional crisis. It was a partisan, political ambush. The dismissal was a calculated plot, hatched by Conservative forces which sacrificed conventions and institutions in the pursuit of power.
God spare us. I mean, some facts. Whitlam led a dangerously incompetent, dishonest and arguably corrupt government. And the last straw for the opposition was yet another scandal. Turned out this time the government had lied and still had some shady Pakistani banker secretly trying to raise a $6 billion loan, God knows what they'd be worth now, for the government, and raising it from even shadier Middle Eastern sources, and all without legal authority. So, bang. Then opposition leader Malcolm Fraser said, enough, the coalition would refuse to approve the funding the government needed to run things, the funding for wages and even pensions, unless Prime Minister Whitlam called another election. Well, Whitlam refused, and he ignored the warnings that he could be sacked for that by Governor-General Sir John Kerr, as he tried to govern without the money. And this went on for a month, until Kerr, who was in fact a Labor man, appointed by Whitlam himself, said enough. He sacked Whitlam and appointed Fraser caretaker Prime Minister on a promise to pass the money bills immediately, and elections were also called immediately. And for everyone howling, oh my goodness, democracy is almost destroyed on that day. What nonsense. The public got its say and it smashed Labor at the election, endorsed that decision to get rid of it, and even repeated the dose in the 2 elections after that. They were glad to have stability again.
You can depend on Malcolm Fraser. You can depend on Malcolm Fraser.
But along now comes Sam Mostyn, Albanese's hand-picked Governor-General and friend, to say, whoa, she'd never have sacked Whitlam the way Sir John Kerr did without giving him a warning, saying, oh no, I don't believe a Governor-General should ever be in the business of surprising a Prime Minister.
The Prime Minister had no notice that it was coming.
I mean, seriously, does Mostyn really not understand that Whitlam was a man who couldn't be warned, is such a loose cannon. Now, her own mate knows exactly why Sir John Kerr didn't warn Whitlam. Even if his hate-spinning speech last night, he dismissed Kerr as just being a paranoid, a cat's paw of the evil Conservatives.
The opposition had preyed upon John Kerr's desire to be at the centre of events, and they had cultivated his paranoia, his fear that Whitlam was planning to replace him.
But Kerr, yes, he did think that if Whitlam knew that Kerr might sack him, he'd get Kerr sacked first by the Queen, adding to the chaos and dragging the Queen into a massive constitutional crisis. But forget Albanese's sneers and sneers about this. It was not paranoid at all to think that. Whitlam had in fact himself told Kerr weeks before that he might indeed do exactly that, saying, "It could be a question of whether I get to the Queen first for your recall or whether you get in first with my dismissal." Whitlam later said, "Oh, I was joking," but Kerr had reason to think he was not. In fact, as he was sacking Whitlam, Whitlam said, "I must get in touch with the palace at once," to get Kerr sacked. And indeed, Whitlam led such a pack of cowboys, which people seem to forget, that one of his junior ministers, later Prime Minister Paul Keating, boasts to this day that he even told Whitlam to have that Kerr arrested.
My proposition was that Gough should ask the Queen to accept his advice about the appointment of a new Governor-General, and in the event that Kerr resisted, I said to Gough I thought he should be put under police arrest.
That's what Kerr was dealing with, seeming lunatics capable of any outrage. And in the end, democracy wasn't destroyed. The public voted, and today still votes, and Labor still rants and raves about getting its comeuppance 50 years ago. And don't forget the hypocrisy in doing that. I mean, blocking those money bills is exactly what Whitlam himself tried to do to the Liberals when he was opposition leader. Scores of times. Even saying once that if he did manage to block one of those bills in the Senate, the Liberal government would have to quit, which was exactly Kerr's point. What hypocrites. But I have to say, there is one thing about the dismissal and what happened in the years that followed that did stick in my craw, that made me politically wake up. It was the cruelty of the left and of the media. Their savagery towards Sir John Kerr for doing his duty and letting Australians decide in an election if Whitlam should stay or go. The abuse of that man, the very personal campaign of destruction that was started instantly, led by Whitlam himself, on hearing himself being formally dismissed.
Well, may we say, God save the Queen. Because nothing will save the Governor-General.
And from that moment, Kerr was vilified, ostracised, publicly heckled, mocked. He privately noted in writings that were found after his death, "Other people's sins were heaped upon my head." It was as though, through vilifying one individual, all others except the scapegoat could be cleansed of their responsibility for that great national crisis. I was the scapegoat, the sacrificial animal. And it seemed to drive Kerr to drink all this pressure, and it drove him to this disastrous moment of the Melbourne Cup, where he betrayed just how much he was hurt and how much he'd drunk.
Mr. Chairman, ladies and gentlemen, any little noises that you may happen to hear are only static. It's just something wrong with the system. I want you to understand, and I know that you will, that the minor noises do not destroy the marvellous occasion today is for me and for my wife.
But it was over for Kerr. He was forced out early as Governor-General and made so miserable that he hid for years in England. And when he died back in Australia, his funeral was kept private, virtually secret, for fear of more cruelty. What shameful, shameful treatment of this man. So, November the 11th, pray that for the years to come, this day will be remembered for one thing only, not the fury of Labor, but the sacrifice of so many young Australians in war, so much more worthy